When darkness falls upon an English country graveyard, there are few folk brave enough to walk amongst the mortal remains of the dead. Every headstone has a tale to tell of souls long departed, and for anyone interested in things supernatural, there's no better place to be at midnight, the witching hour. 'Tis now the very witching time of night, when churchyards yawn and hell itself breathes out contagion to this world. Now could I drink hot blood, and do such bitter business as the day would quake to look on. William Shakespeare, author of these blood-curdling lines, certainly appreciated the power of a graveyard and a good ghostly apparition, not to mention a toiling, boiling and bubbling witch thrown in for good measure. The great bard of Avon's plays are interwoven with stories of the paranormal, reflecting an age in Old England's history when anything beyond human understanding belonged strictly to the realm of superstition, folklore, and the supernatural. And so it has continued through the centuries, with natural-born storytellers like Shakespeare fueling the nation's love of a terrifying tale. There's nothing to compare with sitting too afraid to even move a muscle by the fireside's flickering light, listening to ghostly goings-on from long ago. Unfortunately, this is one old English tradition, just like the ghost story itself, that'll never be allowed to die and rest in peace. This programme is not for the faint-hearted, and as we go in search of the ghosts and witches that have chilled and petrified successive generations of thrill-seekers, watch carefully, for there are certainly some surprises in store. We'll start the proceedings by following the trail of the ghost of Charles Dickens, undoubtedly one of England's greatest writers, who was himself responsible for the fictional creation of some of the scariest ghosts of all time. Then we're off to the theatre for a sinister performance featuring phantoms and poltergeists in the otherwise charming city of Bath. Next, imagine yourself shut up in a black, claustrophobic hole for weeks on end, not knowing whether you'll ever see the light of day again, and you'll understand the terrible dark atmosphere that pervades this Elizabethan manor house in the heart of the English countryside. Becoming a modern-day witch hunter will transport us to the rural landscape of Old Warwickshire, where tales of ancient black magic rituals have a chilling degree of authenticity. And last, but not least, our ghostly quest takes a more southwesterly turn to the Celtic treasure that is the mystical county of Cornwall. With a whole host of spirit beings unique to the region, and a boastful claim of the most evil ghost in all England, there's a great deal of exploration to be undertaken. So, courage, mon ami. We will begin. No programme about English ghosts could possibly be countenanced without mention of Charles Dickens, perhaps the most popular writer of ghost stories ever known. When A Christmas Carol was first published in Victorian England, the reading public of the day relished the terror that was inflicted upon Ebenezer Scrooge, the mean old miser forced to change his uncharitable ways by ghostly visitations from spirits of the past, present, and future. The spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain with such a dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. "Mercy!" he said. "Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?" The reason for Charles Dickens' setting of this story at Christmas dates back to ancient times, and the belief that the wandering spirits of the dead were not allowed to make an appearance on Christmas Day, under any circumstances. Consequently, relating ghostly tales around the fire on Christmas Eve became a traditional pastime, because when the clock struck midnight, everyone could retire to their beds, secure in the knowledge that no spook or evil manifestation would disturb their slumbers, no matter how spine-chillingly intimidating and terrifying the storytelling might have been. A Christmas Carol was a huge success, appealing to the Victorians' preoccupation with the dark, the sinister, and the downright horrible. Dickens certainly cashed in on the idea, producing a spooky tale each Christmas time, and of course other authors followed in his very illustrious footsteps until the festive season became synonymous with this ghostly genre. It'll hardly come as a surprise, therefore, that Charles Dickens, the imaginative creator of so many well-loved ghostly characters, is himself still reputed to wander the earth as a restless spirit, haunting the cobbled streets of Rochester, the historic Kent city beloved of his youth, that influenced much of his later writing. Rochester Castle is an imposing Norman fortress where many souls will have thrived and perished in equal measure throughout the ages. Tucked safely in the castle's shadow stands the stunning Rochester Cathedral, and between the two lies an indentation of an ancient moat which serves as a peaceful graveyard for a fortunate few. This was where Charles Dickens wanted to be buried, but at the time of his death, the great and the good of the day insisted that only the grandest church in the land, Westminster Abbey, was sufficiently majestic to receive the mortal remains of such an important Englishman. But if you feel a ghostly presence, a chill in the air as you walk over this spot, or hear strange footsteps when there's no one else in sight, you could be encountering the ghost of Charles Dickens, whose elegant spirit form has often been reported lingering in the vicinity. His bones may lie in an ornate mausoleum in London, but his ghost evidently still prefers this fine Kentish ground, and drinking in the atmosphere of this remarkable location. Who could blame him? Walk onto a stage in any English theatre, and the adrenaline will automatically start to rush. Hands tremble involuntarily, the mouth dries, and any attempt at coherent speech will rapidly prove utterly futile. Memories of the epic terror of school productions come flooding back, making your skin crawl far more chillingly than any horror movie, and the eyes of long-departed theatre-goers seem to linger critically in the atmosphere surrounding every empty seat. But for some, this nauseous fright is what makes life worth living, because to stand before an audience and act is an intrinsic part of their psyche. To those of us who tremble at the first whiff of grease paint and the glaring limelight, this is indeed a bizarre concept. However, for the talented entertainer, acting is in the blood, as they say, and as a profession, thespians are renowned for being great respecters of ghosts and superstitions. There have been an amazing number of well-respected actors convinced that they've seen the ghostly figure of William Shakespeare, critically appraising their performance of his world-famous lines from the front row of the theatre. By all accounts, the spirit of Shakespeare seems to favour notable renditions of Hamlet, the melancholy Prince of Denmark, haunted by the ghostly manifestations of his own murdered father. And of course, no self-respecting actor will ever whisper the name Macbeth, superstitiously referring to the eponymous work as the Scottish play. There's not a theatre in the land that doesn't have a wonderful array of ghost stories with which to thrill its visitors, and the Theatre Royal in the elegant West Country city of Bath is certainly no exception. The Phantom Butterfly of the Theatre Royal is a much-loved and highly unusual ghost, and anybody that's ever come into contact with it, skeptic and sensitive alike, believes that this is one ghost story with real substance. This is a surprisingly modern tale dating back to the Christmas of 1948. The theatre's manager had a remarkable talent for writing pantomime, that great British institution where the dame is always played by a man and the principal boy is always played by a girl. Well ahead of schedule, he completed Little Red Riding Hood by the summer of '48, but sadly, as he finished the last act, he suffered a fatal heart attack, leaving his son to actually bring the pantomime to the Christmas stage. Every detail was attended to, including an elaborate set design with glittering model butterflies, and the entire production was a huge success. Strangely, while the ballet scene with chorus girls dressed as tortoiseshell butterflies took place, the Phantom Butterfly made its first appearance on stage with the dancers fluttering amongst them, much to the delight of the audience. For the theatre owners, the butterfly quickly became established as a lucky talisman, and the original backcloth was hung in the flies high above the stage, where it can still be seen to this day, a permanent harbinger of good fortune. The Phantom Butterfly has since made a succession of timely appearances, alighting upon a variety of famous shoulders, much to the astonishment of many a full house right up to the present day, and always followed by a period of phenomenal box office returns. Ghosts are not always terribly welcome, but nothing would induce the Theatre Royal to take any steps to exorcise their butterfly, and it would be a sad day indeed if this lovely pantomime phantom appeared no more. Step outside the Theatre Royal and you'll discover all manner of neighbouring ghostly comings and goings. This house belonged to the infamous Beau Nash, a rigid follower of smart society, who in the 18th century ruled fashionable Bath with all the pomp and circumstance of a monarch. Gambling was a popular pastime for Nash and his social acolytes, but it was also illegal. Consequently, when the Garrick's Head Hotel on the other side of the theatre was built as his private gambling den, he had the extreme good sense to construct a network of escape tunnels linking all three properties. Although the tunnels are blocked up today, a visit to the theatre's cellar restaurant will reveal the remnants of Beau Nash's clever contingency planning, which no doubt saved many a fine Bath reputation all those years ago. An unpleasant incident that occurred in 1780 is thought to be responsible for the ghostly noises that have been reported here, including clashing swords, shrill screams, and the swearing of diabolical oaths. At this time in England's history, duels were fought in high society at the drop of a hat, or, for that matter, the slap of a well-tailored glove. In the highly charged atmosphere of a secret gaming room, disagreements regularly broke out, and often pistols or swords at dawn were the only honourable means of gaining satisfaction. In this particular case, an attractive lady staying at the Garrick's Head Hotel became the object of two gentlemen's amorous desires as they battled over a game of cards. A quarrel ensued, and much to the lady's consternation, swords were drawn and the duellists began to fight. One of the two was her lover, and she rushed from the gaming tables to the sanctuary of her own room. And when she heard the victor's cry as a body lay dead on the ground, she realized that it was not the voice of her lover. Knowing that her beloved's killer was advancing up the stairs to claim her hand as his prize, she leapt, distraught, from the bedroom window to her gruesome, untimely death. Unlike the theatre ghost, which is of a very gentle nature, the spirit souls of the duellist and his sad lady that wander these underground passages and the interior of the Garrick's Head have a very sinister atmosphere, and the unhappy few that have experienced their tragic ambience have fled the scene with the utmost haste. The Garrick's Head is also reported to be in possession of a poltergeist, a troublesome, dangerous spirit that, although never seen, can cause untold damage and nuisance. Fortunately, this is no longer a hotel, so there are no sleepers to be awoken by the crashing thuds and bangs of poltergeist mischief. However, it is, to this day, a very popular pub, and far from allowing the spirit manifestations in this particularly haunted corner of Bath to act as a deterrent, the Garrick's Head embraces its spooky heritage, and the city's now famous ghost walks start and finish at this historic hostelry. Even in bright sunshine, there's something quite foreboding about Harvington Hall. It's one of those places where an atmosphere lingers, although it's impossible to pinpoint precisely what it is about this house that sends shivers down your spine. Ask anyone in the area about the hall, and the first thing that they'll categorically tell you is that ghostly priests haunt Harvington. Further interrogation, however, will get you no further, as there are no specific spirits responsible for the hauntings, and you really do have to explore the house for yourself and discover what actually happened here historically to understand the highly charged sense of the paranormal. Harvington, as you see it today, dates back to the 14th century, although most of the building is of Elizabethan construction. Life here was rather peaceful and classically rural for a couple of centuries, until King Henry VIII, famed for having 6 wives, wanted to divorce the first of them. It's hard to believe that an event so far removed from Harvington, at the heart of the nation's capital, could change the character of this house so dramatically. But when the Pope in Rome refused to grant the great philandering monarch a divorce, history was truly in the making. Henry broke away from Rome, appointed himself head of the Church of England, formed a new Protestant religion for the whole country, approved his own divorce, and married the bewitching Anne Boleyn. For the steadfastly Catholic family that lived at Harvington, refusal to renounce their faith wasn't too much of a problem to start with, particularly as when Henry's Catholic daughter, Mary, became queen, she restored the country to Rome in line with her own beliefs. Bloody Mary, as she was more commonly known, turned viciously upon the new Protestant clergymen, and any that refused to return to Catholicism were burned at the stake as heretics. A minor diversion at this point, to trace the story of one such Protestant martyr, takes us to Gloucester, and the hauntingly atmospheric St. Mary's Square in the shadow of the city's great cathedral. Here stands a memorial to Bishop John Hooper, a man singled out by Queen Mary as a dangerous heretic and thrown into prison. Despite his old age and appalling rheumatism, he stubbornly refused to renounce his Protestant faith, declaring that he would die for what he believed in first. On the 9th of February 1555, his faith was put to the test, and he was brought to this spot for execution. 7,000 people crowded into the square to watch him bound to the stake with iron hoops and the fire lit. No farewell sermon was allowed, but the dedicated bishop prayed continuously throughout his excruciating ordeal. An eyewitness account remains intact, describing vividly the horrific scene.
Still waters, he restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness.
When he was black in the mouth, his tongue swollen, unable to speak, his lips went on till they were shrunk at the gums. He knocked his breast with his hands, until one of his arms fell off. Then fat water and blood dropped from his fingertips. He never stopped praying during the ordeal, which lasted half an hour, and when his body was finally destroyed, his spirit rose and he was at peace.
Follow me all the days of my life, and I
As an example to other Protestants, this was a terrifying event, and much anti-Catholic feeling was suppressed in such a climate of fear. Unfortunately, a blind teenage boy in the crowd cried out that he'd been inspired by the beliefs of the bishop, and despite attempts to lead him away to safety, the authorities had heard him, and he too was burnt at a stake, ignited by the smouldering remains of Hooper, an extraordinarily gruesome pyre. The haunting ghostly presence of the martyred bishop and his innocent young supporter pervades this entire area of Gloucester, from the old bishop's lodgings out on Westgate Street to the magnificent Cathedral Close, just beyond the gateway from St. Mary's Square. Despite being at the heart of the modern city centre, there's an eerie chill here beyond anything that can be explained, and many people have reported a feeling of being jostled by an angry crowd, when not another soul is to be seen anywhere about. For the newly formed Church of England, Bloody Mary's reign was mercifully brief, but with her successor, Queen Elizabeth I, proving to be as dangerous to the Catholics as her sister Mary had been to the Protestants, we return to Harvington to discover the backlash of religious fervour that was to endanger the lives of the incumbent Catholics at the Hall. In the early days of Elizabeth's reign, she vowed religious tolerance, but as time progressed and the Catholic Church became more determined to reclaim England for Rome, her paranoia and insecurity regarding threats to her own personal safety overcame her. Any priest caught saying Mass was punishable by death, and any household found harbouring a priest would forfeit their property to the Crown and often be thrown into prison as well. For English Catholics, including the Packington family at Harvington, this was a bleak and dangerous time indeed. To counteract such draconian laws, a network of Catholic safe houses evolved across the land, where priest holes became an intrinsic part of the architecture, offering sanctuary to the beleaguered men of God. Harvington Hall has the finest surviving set of priest holes in England, designed and built by the master craftsman Nicholas Owen, a devout Catholic, who was eventually captured in one of his own hides and taken to the Tower of London, where he died while being tortured, preferring to take his secrets to the grave. Fortunately, for the modern visitor to Harvington, the guidebook reveals the whereabouts of the cleverly concealed priest holes, because it would be a tough job to locate them without assistance. They really are tucked away in the most unlikely of places, and here in the library, this raised panelled section of the room has a well-kept secret. Further along the passageway, a seemingly unremarkable bedroom has a false fireplace, complete with fake smoke blacking, and if you take a closer look, this bolt hole into the roof space and further hiding places is absolutely fascinating. The great staircase harbours yet another surprise. Stairs lift to uncover a remarkably large hide, and many a priest hunter would have walked over the top of his quarry without realising what, or for that matter, who, lay beneath his feet. Hunting down priests was a lucrative business, and financial rewards were a much greater incentive at this point in history than religious intolerance. Any priest captured would be tortured mercilessly until he revealed the location and identities of his fellow Catholic supporters. Many didn't survive the rigours of such barbaric treatment, and those that did were subsequently hung, drawn and quartered, a particularly nasty form of execution, whereby the condemned man was hung from a gallows until almost dead, then dragged along the ground, courtesy of speeding horsepower, and if this wasn't sufficient to tear body from soul, disembowelment was called upon to finish the job. It's hard to imagine the fear that these men had to overcome as they lay hidden, often for days on end in total darkness, weak from lack of food, and terrified by every passing footstep. They knew only too well what their fate would be if captured. At the top of Harvington Hall stands the ultimate act of defiance, a stunningly simple, touchingly spiritual chapel, and by the time you reach this tiny room, you'll be in no doubt whatsoever that there are ghostly priests close by. Narrow corridors and hidden doorways force you to glance over your shoulder at frequent intervals. Was that just a shadow, or fleeting black robes? Footsteps sound all around, doors and floorboards creak, the wind rattles window frames, and only the most sceptical of non-believers will leave Harvington unmoved by this uniquely atmospheric, incredibly haunted house. If the interior of Harvington has a distinctly spiritual feel to it, then the ghost that haunts the gardens can only be described as being of more pagan origin. Mistress Hicks was a local witch, revered and feared in equal measure throughout the district. It was said that she had the power to raise a storm at will. But her downfall came when a group of women and children claimed that she'd bewitched them all to vomit pins. Mistress Hicks was found guilty of witchcraft and hanged at a nearby crossroads, leaving her restless ghost to wander around Harvington, wailing her innocence to anyone who'll listen. Whatever the truth of Mistress Hicks's case, witchcraft became a dangerous preoccupation throughout England for many centuries. Just like the notorious Salem witch trials in America, almost anyone could fall foul of the witch hunters who scoured the English countryside in search of practitioners of the dark arts, metaphorically seeing satanic cults appear before their very eyes. It's difficult to believe that the sleepy Warwickshire village of Long Compton was once terrorised by witches, as the honey-coloured Cotswold stone buildings bask in the evening sunlight. However, it used to be said that there were enough witches in the village to draw a wagon load of hay up Long Compton Hill, and there are a disproportionately high number of stories concerning sorcery in the parish records. As incongruous as this may sound, looking at the peace and tranquillity of this modern-day scene, a short journey out of the village takes us to the mysterious Rollright Stones. this site has always been renowned as the ancient meeting place of witches, both good and evil, from the past, the present, and perhaps even the future. A matter of yards from the main circle stands the majestic Kingstone, where local legend has a far more interesting tale to tell than more prosaic archaeologists. A powerful king wanted to rule over all England, and this strategically important area of the Midland counties was crucial to his campaign. He and his circle of brave knights arrived at this spot only to be confronted by one of the Long Compton witches chanting a bizarre challenge.
7 long strides shalt thou take, and if Long Compton thou canst see, King of England thou shalt be.
Laughing at such nonsense, the king strode forward, but as he did so, a mound of earth rose up before him, completely obliterating the view of the village. The cackling witch then cursed him and his knights to be forever stone, and they've remained to this day exactly where they stood that fateful final moment, petrified for all time. There's something rather mystical about this place, and people say that if you have ears sensitive enough to hear the whispers of the Stone Knights, they'll predict the future. For those that believe in ley lines and supernatural energy channels, the Rollright Stones are without doubt a source of great enlightenment. The Old English art of dowsing is much practised here, and strange as it may look, the dowsers are actually using divining rods that spin of their own accord when a spirit energy is present. This is a skill most commonly employed when looking for natural water springs, but it certainly appears to work equally well for any number of paranormal purposes. Although this story has a degree of ethereal charm, there's a far more sinister side to the tales about the witches of Long Compton. At one point in history, no elderly woman in the village would walk with a stick for fear of being accused of witchcraft. The arthritis and rheumatism might be crippling, but being branded a witch could, and all too often did, prove fatal. Anne Turner of Long Compton was an elderly woman who reputedly possessed magical powers, who became the ceremonial victim of an ardent witch hunter. A 2-pronged pitchfork thrust through her throat held her to the ground, and as her blood spilled back into the earth as life ebbed away, the victorious witch hunter declared triumphantly that all of Anne Turner's spells had been broken, and anyone cursed by the evil old hag would henceforth be free. Quite what the unfortunate woman's particular brand of evil was, the records fail to tell. But midwives and wise old women with a knowledge of herbs used in medicine often suffered barbarically at the hands of witch hunters and gossip-mongering villagers. If a baby died soon after delivery, or an infusion of herbs failed to prevent the sick from dying, curses were blamed, and 9 times out of 10, another woman who had attempted to ease the lot of her fellow man was branded a witch. Some were shrewd enough to flee, but this frequently meant leaving everything they possessed behind, as they escaped their tormentors with quite literally just the clothes on their backs. The woods and forests of England have a very close association with witches, as many would meet in covens to perform secret pagan rituals hidden from the prying eyes of the uninitiated. The wych elm, a tree that's now become quite a rare specimen, was thought to be where the thousands of witches who disappeared fleeing the dangers of accusation found refuge, living out their days concealed by twisted bark. For this reason, wych elm is still attributed with sacred properties, and anyone who chops a tree down risks the curse of any witch living within its protection, a dire proposition by anyone's reckoning. With the dark woods of Warwickshire left long behind us, the wild beauty of Cornwall appears over the horizon. One of the most noticeable features of this dramatic landscape are the shadowy ruins of ancient tin mines, where abandoned wheelhouses punctuate the uneven ground. These fascinating relics of Cornwall's once prosperous mining industry are the only visible marker of the labyrinth of haunted mine tunnels carved deeply into the earth below. There's not a Cornishman in all England that doesn't believe in the existence of the knockers, a strange little ghost prospector that helped many a poor miner to find rich seams of tin in the dark, dismal passages of the mine, lit only by a flickering candle. If a miner listened very carefully, he might hear the knocking of the ghostly old men, banging phantom picks against distant walls, which, if followed, could lead to where untold riches lay. Traditionally, miners always left a portion of their food or tobacco out for the knockers, and anyone who chose not to adhere to this ancient custom did so at their own peril. Many a mine accident was blamed on unbelievers causing offence to the knockers, and the stories of men being cast out of the mining community for doubting the knockers' existence are frighteningly frequent. So remember this warning if you ever enter a Cornish tin mine. Listen out for the knocking of the ghostly little old miners who preside over these deep dark depths and always treat them with a healthy respect. Equally as famous as the Cornish knockers are the evil, lawless shipwreckers of Cornwall. All along the rugged coastline, the wreckers are held responsible for the chilling tales told of the ghosts of innocent men, women and children lured to their deaths on the beaches and headlands of Cornwall. This is Jamaica Inn, high up on Bodmin Moor, made famous as the hideout of the wreckers in Daphne du Maurier's well-known novel of the same name. From here, gangs of miscreants would travel to the coast, lighting false fires upon the Cornish headlands, supposedly offering a beacon to lost ships, whilst in fact drawing vessels laden with whiskey, brandy and tobacco onto the rocks and certain disaster. Any survivors who reached the beach would be drowned, and the ill-gotten booty would be transported back to old Jamaica, and any man who stood in their way or betrayed his evil comrades to the customs men would undoubtedly find himself dead in a ditch. Daphne du Maurier's novel may be nothing more than excellent fiction, but there's a distinctly haunted aura hanging in the atmosphere here at Jamaica Inn, which any self-respecting ghost hunter will most definitely revel in. There are those that say that the wreckers never existed, and although native Cornishmen would help themselves to contraband that washed up on the beaches from foundering vessels, whether or not they deliberately set out to do bloody murder, motivated by pure greed, is truly a question consigned to the province of myths and legend. However, smuggling is a different issue altogether, and any Cornishman who could avoid paying the government's duty on his brandy and tobacco would do so with the utmost relish. It's a dark, windy night in Polperro, one of Cornwall's best-loved fishing villages that was a notorious haven for smugglers and their hidden treasures. Walking through the empty streets, the ghosts of generations of smugglers seem to hide around every dark corner, ready to ambush the unsuspecting passerby. Of course, it was only the wind screeching through hanging lanterns. It couldn't possibly have been the anguished ghostly screams of a double-crossed smuggler from long ago. Or could it? It's impossible to travel far through Cornwall without discovering a ghost here, a poltergeist there, and a whole variety of magical, mystical spirits haunting the proceedings. Therefore, the fact that Cornwall boasts to possess the most evil ghost in all England will hardly come as a surprise. This last ghostly journey takes us to an amazingly atmospheric location, where a dramatic, craggy landscape dominates an otherwise pastoral scene. Roche Rock is an angular granite outcrop from which a tiny 15th century chapel seems to grow skywards. Here the ghost of the black-hearted Jan Tregeagle, reputed to haunt Cornwall from coast to coast, sought refuge from Satan's hellhounds as they pursued him across the bleak, rolling moors. Tregeagle, so legend has it, sold his soul to the devil. But when the time came for his spirit's departure to the depths of hell, he begged the Cornish holyman to save him. A pact was forged, but at a price. The clergyman set Tregeagle a penitent task to perform to atone for his terrible sins. This is Dozemarie Pool, believed then to be a bottomless freshwater lake with ethereal properties, and Tregeagle was charged with emptying it with a limpet shell driven with holes. Satan, however, had other plans, sending diabolical storms to force Tregeagle to cease his labours, as the small print in the clergyman's contract relinquished his soul to the devil if at any time he stopped his eternal toil. Looking today at the peace and tranquillity of Dozemarie Pool, it's difficult to conceive of the ghostly screams of Tregeagle that ring out chillingly in bad weather, hotly pursued by Satan's baying hellhounds. But reports constantly verify his presence here, and those that have encountered the malevolent, screaming evil apparition around the water's edge are convinced that they've been terrorised by Tregeagle's ghost. The chapel of St. Michael at Roche Rock proved an unfortunate choice of sanctuary, as Tregeagle's desire to escape the devil was so desperate he forced half of his body head first in through a chapel window. Inside lived a hermit, a devout man of God, who preached endlessly at the black-hearted spirit. This was just too much, even for the most evil ghost in England, and Tregeagle screamed and howled day and night until locals ventured to the chapel to save him from his dreadful plight. There are as many claims here at Roche Rock of Tregeagle's eternally troubled ghost screaming through the night as there are encounters with him at Dozemarie Pool. However, most would accept that this bizarre chapel is the more haunted of the two locations, and it does take nerves of steel to make this chilling climb once darkness has fallen over this electrifying scene. As this programme draws to a close, it's well worth embarking upon a little ghostly detective work, because there was a real Jan Tregeagle who was born near Bodmin in the 1600s, who undoubtedly had a fearsome reputation and a larger-than-life personality. An attempt to find his grave will bring you to St. Breock's Church, not more than a giant stone throw from Roche Rock. The graves are overgrown, and there's an eerie atmosphere to be experienced here. Further investigation will reveal that there were in fact 5 Jan Tregeagles in succession, the much-hated name passing from father to son, generation by generation. This explains, in part, why there are so many sinful deeds associated with this dastardly man, and perhaps this also accounts for the phantom presence of Tregeagle in so many different places at any given time. Standing in the shadow of this ancient church, it's comforting to know that the Cornish nation has a special prayer for dealing with such supernatural manifestations as Tregeagle's ghost. And, as an extraordinarily sensitive people, it's only right and fitting that they should have the last word when it comes to ghosts and witches of Old England.
from ghoulies and ghosties, and long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Good Lord, deliver us.
But for those of you whose appetite for ghost hunting has been whetted by this programme, comfort is the last thing that you'll be looking for. Because, after all, there are more things in heaven and earth than mere mortals can possibly explain. And for lovers of spine-chilling ghostly tales, that's just exactly how it should be.